everybody, and welcome back. Happy Monday to you all. So today I'm going to do a sit down talk video, and I'm going to touch on the topic of mental health, mainly because I have mental health myself, and I don't think there's enough awareness out there for mental health in general. People have a lot of misconceptions about it. So I thought I would tell you what it is, my diagnosis is, what that means, and how it affects me. So the diagnosis that I was given was bipolar type 1. There are a few different types, but let's start with the basics of what is bipolar. So bipolar, otherwise known as bipolar disorder, is a mental health problem that genuinely affects people's moods. So very often people with bipolar will find that they are affected by things called mania or hypomanic episodes. This basically means you feel quite high, very happy and energetic, but to an extreme. You will also find with bipolar that there are times when a bipolar sufferer can end up having a very low depression. There is also a risk for people with bipolar to have some kind of psychotic episode. So hypomanic and depression, some people with bipolar, and this is not everyone, this is just some people, have a potential to have psychotic symptoms. Now this can happen whether you're manic or high, or whether you're depressed and you're low. It can happen at either end of the scale. As I said before, there are different types of bipolar disorder. So you can have bipolar 1, you can have bipolar 2, you can have what's called rapid cycling bipolar, you can have bipolar with mixed features. Some people have what they get diagnosed with as known as bipolar seasonal pattern disorder, and this basically means it just affects you when the mood seasons change. And you can also be told you have an unspecific bipolar. So they are the different types of bipolar. As much as a lot of people have heard about bipolar, not everybody knows bipolar by that term. It used to be called manic depression. That eventually got changed to the different grades of bipolar. So if some people referring to bipolar as manic depression, either way they're the same thing, the name just changed. Although many people have heard about bipolar, a lot of people don't fully understand what it means, and they don't have a full understanding of how it affects people, and this can lead to people having some big misconceptions about you or how you may perceive to be. This can often be because of a negative portrayal of bipolar, especially in things like the media and TV programs and things like that. Bipolar can often be given a very negative perception, and that is not the case. In fact, it's actually rare for it to be as bad as you often see it on a TV show. For anyone watching, if you want to be more informed or just learn a little bit more about bipolar disorder, or you have a friend or family member that's recently been diagnosed, what I'm going to do is in the comments down below, I will leave a link to the Mind website, which is my go-to page for mental health disorders. I think they explain things very well, so I will leave that in the comments below for you all to go and have a look at, and that'll be the link for all the information that tells you what bipolar is, how it affects people. It's got videos on there that you can watch. It is an amazing website to use. So yeah, I will leave in the description and in the comments the link to the Mind website for anyone right now who wants to learn more about bipolar disorder. Things that I have heard is that people ask what bipolar means. Technically it's split into two halves, so you've got bi and you've got polar. So bi means two, polar obviously is opposite. So it basically is a reference and referring to the fact that two opposite ends of the mood scale. So when you're manic and you're high and you're all the way up here, and then the complete polar opposite of that is when you're down here and you are low and depressed and feel like you've really hit rock bottom. And I think that's where people get a bit confused, because some people argue that bipolar isn't just two opposite ends, because there is a whole shift of things going on in between either end of those poles. But yeah, so bipolar is two opposite. I do think that the term bipolar does lead definitely to a lot of misunderstandings. People often think it just means you have extreme mood swings or you have severe depression, and really isn't the case. It's so much more complex than just having a bad day. So when we talk about mood episodes, when your mood is changing, you can range from anything from severely depressed right through to manic state. But there's also many different things in between, which is why it becomes quite a complex thing, because you might not always hit severe depression, but you may hit a form of depression, and that may go on for an extended period of time. Just the same as if you were to hit mania. Some people don't hit full mania, and that's often known as hypomania, when you're not at the absolute peak of the mania, but you're still in that very high, very flustered kind of state that people can get into. So yeah, because of that, there are a lot of misconceptions about the way that people with bipolar can behave. So a lot of people, when you're explaining bipolar to them, they'll often say, well, everybody has a change of mood. And yes, that's correct. We all have mood changes. We all have good days. We all have bad days. But when you have bipolar, these mood changes can often be really, really distressing. On top of that, they can have a huge, huge impact on your ability to function and your daily life. I think that's where people see the difference. So for instance, someone who does not have bipolar, who's having a bad day, might just be a bit grumpy, a little bit snappy that day. So somebody with bipolar, like myself, a bad day to us is really, really horrendous. Basically, it's not just a case of being in a bad mood, it's a case of literally feeling like you have no self-worth. Most likely you'll end up being really sad, you'll want to be on your own, that kind of thing. So yeah, there's a huge difference between your average person's bad day and a bipolar bad day or good day. Bipolar is two opposite ends of the scale, and I'm going to speak to you today about manic and hypomanic episodes. And as I've said previously, this kind of just means that someone is feeling very high. So it can be called manic or hypomanic, and it's also known as mania or hypomania. They all mean the same thing. They all just mean that your mood is elevated, your mood is extremely high. The difference between manic and hypomanic is the seriousness of it. So somebody with severe mania or manic, someone who is manic, that is often extremely severe cases. Severe mania or manic mood episode is extremely serious, and most often than not, someone who is going through a serious manic episode generally requires hospital treatment to get well. And obviously the other term that I mentioned is hypomanic or hypermania. Now this is a much more moderate version of mania. It certainly would not require hospital treatment, but it will still be a very noticeable change in your mood. It's just not as severe as mania. So what impact on your life does manic and hypomanic episodes have for somebody with bipolar? Well, if you are having a manic episode, remember that is the severe end of it. If you're having a manic episode, it is likely to have severe impact on your ability to do any daily activities, anything of your normal. The likelihood is you would probably stop doing your activities completely, because by that point you're genuinely very unwell. And the difference with that is that with hypomanic, the lower end of things, you will find that your daily life feels disrupted, but most people with hypomania can still get on with their basic daily routine and will probably still socialise and go about their day, or even manage to go to work, whereas somebody with severe mania just would not be able to function at all. How long do these mood episodes last for? Well, this can vary completely from person to person. If someone's having the high-end mania mood episode, for it to be classed as mania, it does have to last for over a week. I think when it comes to hypermania, I think it's 3 or 4 days. If it's lasted 3 or 4 days, then you would officially be classed as in a hypomanic state. Although both manic and hypomanic episodes can last quite some time, they do vary person to person, severity, whether you've got severe and moderate versions of this particular mood state that you're in. But yeah, they can, sometimes they can last much longer than a week, or much longer than 3 or 4 days. So if you've got a friend or a family member, or you have newly diagnosed yourself and you are wondering what it is you look out for when it comes to the symptoms of the mood state changes. So one of the big lookout things would be to look out for the severe side of mania. So the severe side of mania often includes very high risk-taking activities, very impulsive decisions, things like that, and just often a change of attitude as well. Very, doesn't seem to care, doesn't seem to stop to think about consequences of something that's going on. So yeah, like, that is definitely the biggest telltale sign, is if someone's having extreme risk-taking behaviours. So that is a very clear sign to look out for someone who is in a manic state, and at that point you likely need to get them or yourself some help as soon as possible. Another thing to look out for with people who go into full manic is to keep an eye on psychotic symptoms. People who go into a full manic state are very high risk for a psychotic breakdown. It's not common, but it does happen, and it's certainly something to look out for. So you would be looking for things like any signs that yourself or that person is hallucinating or becomes very delusional. Yeah, so things like that. Obviously a psychotic episode is extremely dangerous and would require immediate medical attention. And for someone who's hypomanic, which again, remember, is the lower end, so people in hypomanic states will never ever have psychotic symptoms. They will not get to that level. So if you notice that someone has reached the level of psychosis, then you can be assured they're in full-blown mania, and they are certainly not in hypomania. So both forms of mania and hypomania are extremely difficult to manage. They're extremely difficult to have to experience, and sometimes people aren't always sure which state they're in. at that point you can go and ask for an assessment to check what state you're in, or if you've figured out your managing skills, you can just manage it yourself and ride it out. More often than not, if you are hypomanic, which is again the lower end, then the likelihood is that in between your swaps from hypomanic to depression, you will probably have quite a stable, steady patch in between. But yeah, obviously, if you're not sure what's going on with yourself or a friend or family member, go and ask for support, go and ask for help. There are many different sources. There's loads of resources on the internet. There is your GP, there are mental health services. So yeah, always get support if you need it. Because I have bipolar, I'm now going to give you a bit of a rundown about how it makes people feel when they are in a manic or hypermanic state. Most of these things are personal to me, these are the things I feel, but from the research that I've done since my diagnosis, I find that these are really quite common with a lot of people. So one of the main things with hypomania or even mania is a massive sense of joy and happiness. You just feel like you are on top of the world, nobody can bring you down. You can often become really excited over simple things. You can be uncontrollably excited. Another thing that I have massively suffered with during these times is I get really fast racing thoughts. I have so many ideas and so many thoughts, and they're just whizzing around, and I think that's one of the hardest parts of it. Anyone who's watching this has bipolar and has ever suffered with racing thoughts during mania, I think you'll know where I'm coming from, but it's really difficult to try to explain to somebody what it feels like to have racing thoughts that you don't feel that you have control over. Other things that can happen during mania is, for me, is sometimes I can become much more agitated. I can be much more sensitive, and I can have a much shorter fuse. That tends to come more with the depression side. But when I have experienced spells of hypomania, and when I'm hypomanic, I often find that I am much easier to annoy and become very irritable. You might hear a lot of people say that they like being hypomanic or manic, just because of a lot of the feelings that come along with it. So, for instance, I very often feel extremely confident or super adventurous when I'm hypomanic or manic. So to feel like that is good, especially for me, because I have the worst low self-esteem possible. I give myself a daily battering on a regular basis. So yeah, when I'm in one of those kind of states, I don't always feel the need to go and seek help, because I like the exciting feeling that I get. I actually enjoy the fact that, so yeah, I actually enjoy the fact that I feel confident during that time, which might be weird to some people, but because I'm not always like that, I'm certainly not a confident, outgoing kind of person at all. So during these times, I become that person, and sometimes I really just enjoy being that, like, fun-loving, don't care what anybody thinks, just totally want to go out there and have fun kind of person. If you're in full-blown mania, however, you will likely go from being excited and confident to feeling like you are completely untouchable, or even believe that no one or nothing can harm you. That is definitely the more severe end of the scale with mania, and it can lead to danger to those people, or even danger to people around them. But yeah, you can start to believe that you are literally invincible. Another thing that I notice, and I have seen a lot of other people discuss this, is when I'm manic or hypomanic, I find quite often that my concentration levels are way better. To the point where I can actually get on with tasks, I can do jobs. I tend to be actually better at managing my tasks during those periods than on a normal day. A big downside for me with hypomania and mania is the lack of sleep. You will not sleep very much at all. Your brain is so wired and you are so high on the way that mania makes you feel that you can guarantee you will struggle to sleep. I've recently had a bit of a mini hypomanic mood state recently, and I did not sleep for 3 days. Now, I was irritable, I was really tired, and it got to the point where on the third day I ended up ringing the doctors because I just couldn't cope with the lack of sleep that I was having. I mean, I think within that 3 days, the sleep I got was an hour and a half, tops, over a span of 3 days. So, yeah, sleep can be a huge problem when you're manic or hypomanic. So let's talk about how you might behave. So we spoke about feelings, so let's look at your behaviour of what other people might be able to spot when it helps them notice that you've changed and shifted into hypomanic or manic state. So one of the easiest ones to spot would be that that person is way more active than they would normally be. For me, that's easy to spot. I'll be up, down, up, down, up, down, doing job after job after job. They will talk a lot, or yourself if you're trying to find your own behaviours, patterns. Talk a lot, talk quickly. Sometimes talk so much that actually people might not be able to keep up with you. You may notice that your friend or family or yourself actually become much more friendly around people they don't know, which can be a huge character change in that person, and it's certainly something to look out for. One of the things I've noticed in myself is that during hypomania or mania, I can often say really inappropriate things without meaning to and without thinking about the consequences of what I've said. So that is definitely one to look out for. There are some people in a hypomanic or manic mood state that will actually misuse things like drugs and alcohol. Now, this isn't something that I have ever done. It's just not my thing. I don't do drugs. I don't drink. But there are a lot of people out there that when they realise they're in that state, they will turn to drugs and alcohol. So if you know someone who is prone to that behaviour and you suddenly notice that that behaviour has ramped back up again, then it's definitely worth looking into the fact that they might be manic or even hypomanic. And the other big behaviour change, especially in me, and I think that this is a pretty common one, one to definitely look out for is excessive spending and impulsive buying. I was really bad with this, to the point where I now have to pretty much keep a track of practically every penny I spend, so that I can monitor when my spending gets a little excessive. I used to say to people, I'm not well, take my bank card off me, because I knew what I'd be like. So yeah, that is definitely a very common trait when someone's hypomanic or even manic, is that they will excessively spend money and make impulse decisions, impulse buys. This can actually lead to safety risks. This is how a lot of people with bipolar end up in really serious debt. I'll give you an example. I could have possibly gone down that road myself. Over 5 years ago now, I went through quite a severe manic episode. During that manic episode, I booked a holiday to Disneyland for me and my son. I was all excited, yeah, can't wait, somewhere I'd always wanted to go. As you can see, I'm wearing Disney. I'm a huge Disney fan. And it was just such an impulse. I just walked into this place, I just booked the holiday, came home and told my son, "Oh, we're going to Disney, yay." A couple of days later, when I was starting to feel better again and come down, the realisation dawned on me I'd just spent a lot of money that I didn't have. And on top of that, we didn't even have passports. So then I had to spend more money that I didn't have, because then I had to buy passports, because I didn't want to cancel the holiday because I'd already told my son about it and it was going to be our first trip there. So I just decided best make it as magical as we can. But that's just one little thing that I did. Now, there are people out there who could buy much more expensive things than a little trip away. And it is really common for these people to end up in really severe debt and quite often homeless, because they have no ability to control their impulses when they're manic. So yeah, that was just a really simple rundown of what bipolar is and one little part of bipolar, and that is the manic and hypomanic episodes that you can suffer. If these videos prove to be popular, I will do another one on the other parts of bipolar, how to get your diagnosis. So please make sure that you like and comment down below if that's something you would like to see. And I will do another one in the future. But before we round it off, I know that a lot of people are going to say, so you've been through the hypomania, you've been through manic, you've possibly had treatment, come back home, how do you know when you're feeling better? So this will vary for every individual, and nobody can say for absolute sure at what point your brain will become conscious that you are becoming well again. For me, one of the first signs I can spot is that I'm coming back down from that high state is that my sleep will slowly and gradually go back to normal. So I will go from not sleeping at all to probably sleeping a full straight 18 hours. That's normally the first sign that things are getting better. I will often then start to realise that I don't have full accountable memories, especially if I was in a mania, not so much a hypomania. I generally remember them. If I go into full-blown mania, I do struggle to actually remember what happened during that time. Don't know why that is. If anyone's watching this video and you have bipolar, please comment down below and let me know if this is something that you've noticed. Do you seem to have like gaps in your memory from when you've not been very well? Sometimes I'll remember certain things and they're not always good things to remember, and at that point I know that the shame will kick in. Like, I'll be ashamed of something that I might have done when I had no control over it, and I'll feel really guilty. I will likely try to make amends and take responsibility for any actions that I may have taken during that time. But it can be hard to do that, and it does require swallowing a bitter pill sometimes. But I don't always remember everything. And then I think at some point I will then try to remind myself that it's not me, it's the illness that I have, and I am not completely and wholly in control or responsible for how it makes me feel and how I behave at times. That's not to say it's not my fault, it's just to say that I have to accept that there are some things I can't control, and getting ill and the way I am when I'm ill, I don't have control over that. Some people do, and that's fantastic, but for me, I generally don't have any control at all. I think I'll leave it there for today, guys. So we've discussed what bipolar is and what hypomania and mania are, what they feel like, how you behave. So yeah, I'm going to leave it there for today, and we will cover other aspects of bipolar in another video. So please like this video if you want to see a little bit more about bipolar. it supports the channel, and just remember, if you do have bipolar, or you have found out that a friend or family member has bipolar, please remember to check the description box and the comments down below, where I will leave a link where you can get plenty of information. And also just remember, you are not alone. There are thousands of us out there with a diagnosis, and as much as we're all individuals, a lot of the symptoms that we all suffer are very common. And by all means, if somebody wants to reach out to me and just wants to talk or vent, by all means do so. I am available at any time. Either comment, send me a private message. In my bio, you will find a link to my Instagram page and also my Facebook page. My inbox is always open to anyone who wants a natter. But yeah, thanks for watching this today, guys. And yeah, if this proves popular, I'll definitely do another one. And once we've covered all the different topics of bipolar, I will then give you the story of how I got diagnosed. So yeah, thanks for coming along today, guys, and hopefully I will speak to you all very soon. Thanks for watching. Bye.